You might be spending too much money on your backpacking gear. And in this video, I want to talk about budget alternatives to expensive gear items where it just may make more sense for you to save the money and not spend all of that cash on the more expensive items. Now let me break this down here for a second, because all of you watching the video here today, including myself, are going to be coming from different perspectives, different goals and mindsets and life situations. It's important to understand that there are some key conditions or considerations when it comes to how you choose to buy the pieces of gear that you buy. I think very often it's presented, particularly here on YouTube, that you got to have the fanciest, nicest, most expensive pieces of gear for you to enjoy your time outside. And that is just not the case. And I'll be the first to say that it's not lost on me as a gear reviewer, as a YouTube creator, that I have had access and do have access to some really nice pieces of gear in my relationships with brands. So I think it is still important to have this conversation of alternatives to really expensive gear items that are still really good and are still going to help you have a really good positive experience in the backcountry. Very often, some of my favorite pieces of gear aren't the highest and fanciest, most expensive gear items. So that's the first thing I want to focus on is not everybody is working off an unlimited budget or has all of this disposable income. Sometimes buying a new piece of gear is the only thing that you're able to do for your backpacking that year. And so it's important to find the items that work really well, fit within your budget, and give you a quality experience. Now, secondly, the gear that we buy for our backpacking is very often going to be focused around checking boxes of the goals of how we want to spend our time outside. Everybody's going to approach that differently. We all are going to want to be outside in different ways, and very often that can be location specific as well. Where you are located, the types of trails you have access to, and just what those conditions and the seasons that you spend time outside in are like will dictate what kind of gear you are purchasing. And very often, a good lower cost piece of gear that's still high quality checks all of the boxes that you need for a quality experience. And then third, maybe you did spend a good amount of money on a certain piece of gear for a certain season or conditions or type of trip that you were going on, but you want to expand your backpacking a little bit beyond that specific condition. And in that case, when you're kind of on the fringes of certain pieces of gear, it doesn't make sense to invest a lot of money into an item that is not going to get a lot of use. And in that case, focusing on a budget piece of gear that doesn't drain your bank account is the way better route to go in your gear purchasing, because it may sit on the shelf longer, just doesn't have as much use. And so there is the win-win in that case, because I get a piece of gear that is going to check all the boxes, do exactly what I need it to do for those like early season, late season trips that I do, and then I'm not having all of this money just sitting on a shelf not getting used. I turned around for my hike because it's just such a sloppy, muddy, nasty mess out here from a lot of recent rain that we've had. But what I want to do at this point is share with you all just a few examples of gear items where the budget alternative is a great choice and something worth considering because it doesn't drain your bank account and it's just a good piece of gear. Now, I'm someone that believes that there is a big difference between cheap and budget, that they are not the same. Cheap simply means that cheaply made, low quality, and it's a piece of gear that is not going to last. Whereas a budget item can still be, and in most cases is still, a really good high quality piece of gear that's going to last for several years, take the abuse of time out on the trail, and just be a great item that doesn't break the bank. So I'm going to talk about a couple of headlamps here first to show and kind of emulate this discussion. What I have here is the Nightcore NU21 and the Petzl Actic Core. This is a $30 headlamp, and this is a nearly $90 headlamp. They both put out light and they both do what you need by, let's see here, there we go, by illuminating your campsite, by illuminating your tent and making it possible for you to see in the dark. So do I need to spend an additional $60 almost for this headlamp versus the $30 for this headlamp? Likely not. Again, it comes down to what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with your gear? The big difference between these two items is the Actic Core has the fancy core battery. It also has a higher lumen output, so it's going to cast more light over a bigger space or extend to a longer distance. And if that is what you need out of the item, then yeah, maybe spending that money is worth it. But in most cases, I find that going with something like this that has a 200 or 300 lumen output is more than sufficient for the conditions that we find ourselves in as backpackers. Now, the next example to talk about here is footwear, and specifically how this falls into that like condition number 3 that I talked about, where you are looking at gear items that are maybe on the fringes of what you need to accomplish some of the trips that you've got planned. Early season, late season trips where maybe I'm in really rainy conditions, or early like snow is falling, or late snow conditions, and I need a waterproof boot, as opposed to your go-to most likely is going to be a trail runner. This is a really good buy. This is the Drift Shield from Nordivate, and I want to thank them for sponsoring this portion of this video. I have done some work with Nordivate in the past. I have been impressed by their products for the price. This boot, the Drift Shield, is waterproof. It's a supportive kind of mid-height boot that has a nice gusseted tongue here, so I keep debris and everything out, but also waterproof up to this point. And it comes in at a price point of $60, as opposed to my Danner Trail 2650 Mid, which is also a waterproof boot. This is like $160, $180. So nearly $100 more than this. So if I'm in that situation of on the fringes, I prefer to hike in the warmer months in a trail runner, but sometimes I need a boot, then a $60 boot like this is a good buy. This is a good route to go because it gives you all of the things that you want out of a boot, but it doesn't break the bank. And from my experience of using the Nordivate products, I've used this boot as well as another one for the past year out on winter trips, and they're impressive for the price point. They've held up, they don't fall apart, and the sole does a fairly decent job. It's not the most aggressive tread pattern that I've seen on a boot, but I have been impressed. They're just a good product. And again, for that $60 price point, I think they're pretty impressive. So that's the Nordivate Drift Shield. Link down in the description to check it out. And I want to thank Nordivate for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now, the next gear example that you're probably spending too much money on is around down jackets. What I've got here in my hand is the Arc'teryx Serum down jacket. This has a retail price point of $400. That's a lot of money to spend on a down jacket. Do you need to spend $400 on a down jacket like I did? Probably not. What I'm wearing is the Decathlon MT500 down jacket that comes in at a price point of $180. And very often you can find it on sale as well. So I'm bringing that price down even more. If I'm being completely frank and honest and transparent, the difference between these jackets and their warmth and comfort is completely negligible. Like, I couldn't tell you that this jacket is absolutely worth that much more, $200 more in price point than what you get out of this Decathlon jacket. So why spend all of that extra money in that case? Now, I do really like the quality of the Arc'teryx jacket. I did spend that money on this, and this from previous experience before I burnt some really nasty, gnarly holes in my original serum, this lasted for at least a decade. I had a previous one that just went and went and went on so many trips, just lived an amazing life. And is that going to be the case with this decathlon jacket? I would hope so, but I haven't had the ability to use it for upwards of 10 years of time. But again, do I need to spend $400 on this to get a similar amount of comfort and warmth that I get out of a jacket that is under $200? Now, the next example to share here revolves around tents. One of these tents costs $470 and one of them costs $260. They're both fully freestanding one-person tents, and they are both made from a nylon material, and they're double-walled. So which one is the more expensive tent? This one right here. This is the MSR Hubba Hubba LT1 that is $470. This is the Hill Zero Scout one-person tent. It's $260. They are made from similar materials. They are similar builds in just being a fully freestanding kind of dome style one-person size tent. Is this MSR Hubba Hubba absolutely worth $200 more than this Hill Zero? Arguably no. They're going to do a lot of the same things. And I think that's an interesting conversation to have, likely in a totally other video, about the value of what you get out of a tent. I feel like, and I know several other people that agree with me, that you can spend a significant amount less on a backpacking tent that's still lightweight and will do all of the things as well, and in some cases better than more expensive counterparts. When you're looking at tents, decide what your goals are, what your budget is, what you need that product to do for you. But in a lot of cases, spending less money is the way to go. This MSR Hubba Hubba LT is honestly not that great of a tent. I have a lot of issues with this and wouldn't recommend spending the almost $500 for this, while this Hill Zero, $260, this tent's fantastic. Now, my last example here is around sleeping bags or quilts, and where you can save a lot of money in your backpacking system is not overpaying for a sleeping bag or a quilt. There are so many really good high quality options out there that are just gonna do what they need to do in making it so you sleep warm and comfortable and help you just enjoy yourself in getting a good night of sleep. This sleeping bag is the Greystone 20-degree down sleeping bag from Big Agnes. This is an impressive sleeping bag at $270. Now, it doesn't have a bunch of fancy, super high fill power down inside of it. So it's not gonna be the most ultralight option out there versus other options, but it is sufficient and lightweight enough for me to not overpay and still get a really good high quality sleep. I've got a full length zipper down the side. I have plenty of loft for me to stay warm enough. I've got a nice draft collar here across the top and the opening, a nice generous size hood, and it's just a really good, comfortable sleep out there on your trips. But if you compare it to something like this Sea to Summit Ascent Down, are you really getting that much better of a sleeping bag by going to this Sea to Summit option, which is a price point of $450? Now, I have experience of sleeping out on trips with both of these bags, and the only real difference for me between them is the temperature basically that you're able to go down to sleep comfortably. The Greystone is going to be a little bit colder than this Ascent Down. This is a 15-degree bag where the Greystone is a 20-degree bag. But I can get a 0 degree in the Greystone if I want and still be less than the $450 that this Ascent sleeping bag is from Sea to Summit. But this one from Sea to Summit because it is more expensive, it has more features to it. I've got a zipper down here on the foot box so I can stick my feet out and I can vent my feet that way. I've got a full-length zipper on one side, and then I have a second zipper on the other side of the bag that allows for this to open up and kind of function as a quilt. But then I have some snaps here at the top so that on days where I'm hanging out in the tent or around camp, I can almost use this like a poncho. So I stick my feet out of the bottom, my arms are coming out each side of the zipper, and I've got all of that warmth from all of the down to make it really comfortable and enjoyable to sit around camp. And that's where you have to just decide, like, what do I need out of a piece of gear? What does that need to do for me while I'm out there? Do I want all of these creature comfort things that add weight, they add cost to the product? Or can I go more simplistic and just get that traditional quilt or mummy bag and still have a really good, enjoyable time out there on my trips? Hopefully you've found this discussion helpful and almost like giving you permission to not spend so much money on certain pieces of gear. But again, goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you need the piece of gear to accomplish for you on your trips? And then look for the items that fit within your budget or that you want to invest in that accomplish those things that you need them to do. Thanks for watching today, guys. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. Hope you have an awesome day. We'll see you later.